John Welsh was born in Canada in 1866 and then moved to Dalton, Illinois with his parents and 6 other siblings. By 1890, at the age of 24, John Welsh was working as a train conductor for the L.E.W. Railroad in Illinois. One of his brothers also worked for the same railroad. John was unmarried and was known as a sober, industrious, and hard-working young man. On Sunday, March 3, 1889, at around 8 a.m., John Welsh was making a coupling in the rail yards when the thumb of his right finger got caught between two deadwoods of two cars. The smashed thumb had to be removed by a doctor. A few months later, on Friday, May 17th, Welsh was allowed back as a conductor and took his first train out since his thumb injury. After starting up work again, everything was getting back to normal for John. That is, until the early morning hours of October 3rd, 1889. John was on train number 44, hauling several oil cars and heading eastbound through the township of Arcadia. At one point in the trip, two sections of the rail cars broke loose from the engine. John Welsh had to jump into action from the caboose by setting brakes on some of the rail cars to keep them from colliding with the other rail cars and crashing. He had set the brakes on several cars and was headed toward one of the oil-carrying cars when the section of the rail cars that he was on crashed into the middle section of the rail cars. A collision crushed his head between two of the cars. John Welsh was unmarried and only 24 years old. The ghost of John Welsh. The Ohio city where John Welsh lost his life was in a township called Arcadia. It sits about 8 miles between two larger cities, Findlay and Fostoria. The railroad tracks that John's train number 44 was on run parallel to Highway 12, which runs right through the middle of all three of these cities. As I said, John had been killed in May of 1889. By January of the following year, 1890, reports were coming in from the Arcadia area about a midnight phantom who was terrorizing employees of the L.E.W. Railroad. Trainmen on the L.E.W. Railroad between Findlay and Fostoria in Arcadia were greatly disturbed by what they claimed was the ghost of the dead conductor, John Welsh. At that time, there was a dense woods to the side of the tracks. That caused an arch in the track above the rails, and this was where John Welsh met his fate. The midnight train that ran from the waterside city of Sandusky, Ohio, and headed west to that spot where John Welsh lost his life was where employees would see the headless apparition of John Welsh nearly every night. Engineers and other officials said that when the woods were reached, an object looking like a headless man would come walking slowly out toward the track with a lantern in his hand. The lantern was waving backwards and forwards. The apparition was plainly visible until the engine passed by. At that point, the phantom slowly turned and faded away among the trees. Because of the ghost, the crews who made that trip abandoned that run and were transferred to other divisions of the road. The engineer who brought the train through in mid-January was so terrified over encountering the headless conductor that when he reached the next stop, they had a difficult time convincing him to continue on to the final destination of Lima. He said he would not go through that experience again for any amount of money. No other trains were annoyed by the ghostly conductor, but that was explained by the fact that no other crew at that hour passed that spot where John Welsh lost his life. Employees became very concerned about experiencing the ghost, and unless something was done about the spirit of John Welsh, it appeared that the midnight train was going to have to be abandoned. Now keep in mind this was 1890. The electric light bulb had only been invented 10 years prior. And that train would run through the area at 1 in the morning, so there weren't any city lights. The only light on those tracks were the headlights from the engine. The conductor would be by himself in the dark, maybe a dim yellow light bulb in front of him. Nothing but the sounds of the train around him. And then, in the headlights, he saw a headless body with a lantern walking toward the tracks. If you ever happen to be in Ohio on the 12th highway between midnight and 1 in the morning, and you're heading west from Sandusky, Ohio, if you happen to hit some dense woods just outside the small township of Arcadia, pull your car over to the side of the road and take a look to the north, toward the railroad tracks. You just may see the headless ghost of the 24-year-old LE&W railroad conductor, John Welsh.